like the moon and the sun. She is worth more than gold, like the stars in the sky. She is worth more than diamond. She is worth more than silver. Special kind of woman. Oh yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, we go straight to our next very important item on our day 2, and that is the strategic keynote 3. Strategic keynote 3. And the keynote topic is innovation ecosystems as engines of venture creation. Lessons from African University. And our keynote speaker this morning is Nissi Madu, MD, CC Hub. Please put your hands together for Nissi Madu. She's going to come right up on stage while the citation is being presented. It's going to be an audio visual rendition of her citation. You're welcome, please.
She's a virtuous woman.
Nissi Madu is a leading African innovation ecosystem builder, serving as managing partner of Co-Creation Hub, CC Hub, Africa's foremost innovation and venture support platform. CC Hub has established itself as the continent's most influential hub for technology-driven social innovation, supporting hundreds of startups and institutional innovation programs across Nigeria, Kenya, Rwanda, and beyond. Nissi has led high-impact programs across education transformation, innovation strategy, and entrepreneurship development, working at the intersection of technology, venture capital, and institutional design. Her leadership at CC Hub positions her as one of the most credible voices on how innovation hubs, universities, and venture ecosystems can collaborate to produce sustainable economic outcomes across Africa. She brings to the summit first-hand experience in building the kind of venture architecture that BIV aspires to institutionalize. Nissi Madu's presence brings unmatched credibility in African innovation ecosystem building. As a leader at the continent's most recognized innovation hub, her participation directly validates BIV's model of university-driven venture architecture. Her insights on scaling innovation programs, connecting research to markets, and building sustainable venture pipelines are central to the summit's core thesis. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Nissi Madu, Managing Partner, Co-Creation Hub.
Good morning, everybody. I think we might have to be a bit louder than that. Good morning, everybody. I think there's an important part that the multimedia forgot to mention, that I'm a proud alum of Babcock University, class of 2014. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And just coming back, I think the last time I was here was 12 years ago on my graduation day. And it's exciting. I think when I received this invitation, not just because of what the focus of the summit is about, but also because of what I benefited from, schooling here in Babcock. It was a no-brainer for me to be a part of this. So thank you so much for having me. And well done to the team that put this together as well. I promise I didn't share anything. I think you just pulled that from all of the work that, you know, CC Hub and that I do online. Great. So just before I go straight into this, I hope that this would be a conversation, because the topic I've been giving for this keynote is a very important one. It's a very important one because apart from the fact that it's what I've spent the past 8 to 10 years of my life doing, but I think that Africa is at a very important point. And universities play a very important role in creating this future that we want to see. And I'm more than happy to talk about my perspective and the work that I do in providing that charge to Babcock, you know, to play that role as well. So if you can please put up the slide, I want to start a bit by telling you about Co-Creation Hub Africa. Has anybody ever heard about CC Hub before today? Anybody? Okay, you can see one hand. 2 hands. Okay, so maybe I should spend some time talking about that. I think I can talk a bit about myself and the work that we do at CCO Penny when that comes up. So I mentioned that I'm an alum of Babcock. I graduated with a degree in computer science technology, and that basically created a very good foundation for the work that I've gone on to do. Now, at Co-Creation Hub, we describe ourselves as a Pan-African innovation ecosystem enabler. What that means is that we have a very clear North Star. And that North Star is, how do we accelerate innovation for Africa's prosperity? Now, a lot of times when we talk about that, Africa's prosperity is very clear to us. So it's not this nice terminology. It's about real people, no matter where you're born, whether you're born in the nice urban areas of Lagos, Kigali, Nairobi, or you're in secondary cities, whether you're in Mombasa, you're in Eldoret, you're in Port Harcourt or Enugu or Gombe or Ilorin, wherever you are, that you have access to the skills and the opportunities to be able to create value. And that value that create leads you to live a better quality of life, not just for you, but for your family, for your community, and consequently, the country and the continent. So what that looks like to us is 3 key things. And when I say to us, the work that we do at CC Hub while they're pulling up the slides. The first one is improved livelihoods. So people have access to opportunities to create value from the skills that they have. The second one is around quality education. And the third one is around healthcare. Now, these 3 key areas are very, very important, and I'll highlight why and how. So when we talk about the work that we do in education, for instance, there's one simple thing that drives us, and that's how do we raise the next generation of highly innovative thinkers that solve our most pressing problems? Now, when I say this, I often say, we're not talking about people who have all A's in WAEC or the people with first-class degrees. It's brilliant. But we're talking about innovative thinkers, because the ability to think innovatively creates that opportunity to solve problems. And when we talk about Africa's prosperity, we know that you can't have a prosperous economy without having a productive economy. How many of us agree? Thank you, sir. Now, for you to have a productive economy, you have to have the skilled talent to back that productivity. So you need to have people creating value en masse to be able to have that, right? And one of the things we often say in the development space, in economics, everything is, you look at Africa and we talk about our teeming youth population. And everyone talks about this teeming youth population as an opportunity, right? But it only becomes that opportunity when we're able to unlock it. And what does unlocking it have to do? It's about empowering our teeming youth population with the skills required to be productive, to be innovative, to solve problems. And this is so important. The picture I like to paint is this. How many of us remember COVID? During COVID, the very interesting thing about it is not just that we were all seated at home, right? It was more that borders were shut. And so essentially, the survival of each country depended on what they had within their borders. The ability of the people to think and create problems to keep them alive. And essentially, that paints a larger picture of why it's important that we start to build that skill and talent on the continent to be able to drive the kind of results that we want to see. I will pause here and just see if you are ready to put up my slides. It's coming up? Okay, thank you. And so essentially, that is what has guided the work that we do at CC Hub. And over the past 15 years plus, we've been creating ecosystem, bringing key stakeholders together to be able to drive innovation on the continent. We have tons of startups that we've enabled, startups that have gone on to raise millions of dollars in funds. We've also enabled investment into the startups. They've reached significant number of users. But beyond that, there's one thing that I always like to mention. I remember a few years back, we had some investors that come into Nigeria. They wanted to learn about the startup ecosystem. And so when I was talking about our work with startups, we had some of our founders in the room, and they said to me, oh yeah, so talk to us about your ROI. So when you invest in these startups, how much have they raised? You know, what's their valuation? You know, all of those very interesting numbers. And I said, well, I can tell you all of those things. We have all of those numbers. But at the end of the day, what we're interested in when we're thinking about innovation is not just those shiny metrics. It's about real people, real lives, real transformation. So if your innovation, if your venture is not solving real problems and creating real value, then what are we doing? Because at the end of the day, innovation is to unlock that prosperity and unlocking prosperity on our continent. Now, pending when they put up the slides, I mean, when they put it up, I'm happy to go back there, but I think I'll go straight into my what I want to share today. And in what I want to share today, I'm going to be sharing 10 key points around how innovation ecosystems enable venture and lessons that African universities can learn. Again, this is pulling a lot from the work that we've done. Now, when we talk about the innovation ecosystem, the key thing there is that an ecosystem has different stakeholders that are playing a role. Now, all of these key stakeholders have to come together if truly the ecosystem will be able to unlock the value that we want to see. Now, within this ecosystem, you have the innovators, right? Those who come up with the idea. Now, when they come up with the idea, they need funding. They need to get the funding from somewhere, right? Now, in terms of the funding, of course, you have the investors, and there's a whole lot around the investments with the different types of vehicles through which you can make investments. It could be equity investments, which is, I give you money to put in your company and I say, I want 5%, I want 10%. Or it could be non-equity, so grants, right? Or debt, so I give you a loan, you use it to build your company, then you pay me back, right? Now, this startup has this idea and then they have funding. Now they need to build. Right? If they're going to build, they need people, correct? So they need skilled talent to support them to build. Now, I'll give you some examples. If, for instance, there's some work we were doing in supporting edtech startups on the continent, And I often say that with technology, edtech, fintech, agri-tech, prop tech, create tech, any tech, it's not just about the tech. The technology is the enabler. So if we say edtech, for instance, the education component of it is very important, right? Which means that if someone is building an education technology solution and they say, if somebody uses this tool, they'll be able to pass their exams, or I can guarantee an A in mathematics. I'm just giving that as an example. Now, they have to make sure that indeed when someone uses that tool, that result actually happens. And there are a number of skills required to make that happen, one of which is learning sciences, the art of how, the science of how learning happens, and how you can apply that when delivering learning via technology is completely different from when you're delivering learning in person. Now, we started to work very closely with these edtech startups, and we have learning science managers on our team who provide advisory to them. And then they said, oh great, now we want to hire our own learning science managers. And guess what? We don't have nearly enough of that on the continent. As a matter of fact, we barely have that. And that creates a gap in the ecosystem, because what it means is that our edtech startups cannot grow and deliver the kind of outcomes that we need them to deliver, because they cannot hire the talent they need on the continent to build that. And so part of the work that needs to happen in the ecosystem is say, where are the people who could potentially serve as a pipeline of this talent? And how do you engage them to say, do you realize there's a gap here and you can empower people with the skills? Now there's also government, because as part of this ecosystem, right, that if you empower the startup, they get the funding, they build the nice solution, one policy can totally obliterate that startup, correct? And so I'm painting this picture to us to just understand why ecosystems are important and why the role of ecosystem enablers is very important, and the role that universities play within this innovation ecosystem. Now, a lot of times when you look at the ecosystem, the innovation ecosystem in Africa, the people you see at the center of it are often innovation hubs, right? And that's fine. That's great, because innovation hubs are bringing all of the key stakeholders together. But there's something very important I learned, which is quite interesting. So a few years back, we had an opportunity to go to Japan on an exchange. So we're saying we wanted to do more innovation in hardware on the continent, because in the software space, we see a lot of solutions, right? And in Japan, they have all of this hardware innovation, and we're looking for how do we create that partnership and the linkage between the Japanese innovation ecosystem and the industry and Africa. And so when we went on that visit, they took us to a number of universities there. And what I found quite fascinating was, every time we went to a university and they gave us a brochure just about them, about what they do, the first page of it, you'd see the number of patents that they had. You'd see the number of startups they had supported. And here's where it was very interesting. The number of startups they had supported that had listed on their stock exchange. It's a different case. So they're not just saying now we have 100 startups. It's like these guys have gone to market. There's demonstrated evidence of this. And they started to talk a lot about how a lot of the big corporates in Japan will come to, if they wanted to innovate or R&D, whatever, it was coming to the universities and saying, hey, we have this amount of money, do this research, come up with it. Of course, start to commercialize it. The very interesting one I saw was a particular startup that was built on the research of one of their professors. So the CEO of the startup was a student, was a young person, had run multiple businesses, and their professor was the one who owned the patent for microsatellites, and they were trying to commercialize that research to find various applications for microsatellites. And I thought that was a very interesting combination. And so that sort of also fueled our own work on the continent, saying, how do we help academia play a more important role in the innovation ecosystem? And what kind of support is possible, and what sort of linkages are possible between innovation hubs and academia? And so that is my first point, that we need to move beyond, and I think I heard the speaker who was recapping conversations from yesterday, beyond the traditional model where, yes, we do all of the research, but it's now about ensuring that academia plays that role, prototyping, validating, scaling, and making that connection between both parties. I see the slide is up. Thank you. So I would just pause on that thought quickly to come to this slide and share a bit about the work that we do at CC Hub, so that it gives you a bit of background into a number of the things I'll be sharing. I see I just have a few minutes. And so to what I had said about building ecosystems, and CC Hub's focus on accelerating innovation for prosperity on the continent. Please go up, next slide. And so I think I already talked about our vision, our mission, innovation for Africa's prosperity, and essentially making sure that we're creating an ecosystem where this cycle happens. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of the work that we've done over the past 15 years plus, it's, over $17.1 million that has been deployed directly into startups, both equity and non-equity funding, and the startups themselves going ahead to be able to attract over $170 million. Plus, number of entrepreneurs that we've supported, and the direct and indirect jobs they've created, as well as the community that we've built as well. I see the slide. Okay, great. If you can just scroll up, please. Now, we do this work across a range of different countries. We have physical presence in 4 African countries, in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Rwanda, and in Namibia, but we also implement programming across over 40 African countries. Next slide, please. Now, this just paints, and you can't see very clearly, but sort of paints the journey from when we started out to now. One of the key things, for instance, I want to highlight when we talk about an ecosystem approach is one of the very important pieces of work we did was engaging the government in Lagos State very early on then to waive the right of way fees for laying fiber optic cable in Yaba. And that basically gave rise to Yaba being the area that had a lot of startups, there because of that, work. And so essentially, when we talk about ecosystem enabling, saying what is it that we truly need to do and who do we need to engage to unlock that value is one of the things to highlight there. Next slide, please. Now, I think I already talked about our focus areas. Please go up. I talked about education, creative, and health. Next slide. Yes, I think. Keep going to this point. Yes. So, in terms of the work that we do, there are levers through which we make change happen across all of those key sectors. And so support to startups and startups building across a range of different areas. There's civic and digital resilience. So essentially in that, a lot of the things we look at is as we're pushing for more innovation and tech, we start to look at the impact of technology on society and what are the key things we need to take into consideration. One of which is online safety has become a thing. So how do we make sure we start to think about that and empower people? Investment, I already talked about investment. Sorry, please just go up there. Let me quickly. Yes, so investments, we make both equity investment as well as enable non-equity investments in startups. Innovation hub strengthening is work that we do as well. So apart from the hubs that we own and run, we also support hubs across the country and the continent. Research and human-centered design as well, in terms of what are the key things that need to be built and need to be designed, and how do we enable research around that. Academic research-based innovation is also work that we do with academia, workforce development, community and ecosystems. One of the things under community and ecosystems that I would like to highlight is that we talk a lot about social capital. And people often ask us, what is social capital? Essentially, when we bring key stakeholders together and create a vibrant community, we create a space where when you're part of it, a founder can meet their co-founder in that community. They can meet an investor. They can meet a stakeholder that unlocks growth for them. And that's essentially a key picture. So I just wanted to paint that a little bit. Next slide, please. If you just keep going to the last one. Just last one. Yes. So I just wanted to highlight some initiatives that we've done. Please keep going. So we implement the Masaka Foundation EdTech Fellowship Program. It's a program that supports startups across the continent. We do that in Nigeria and Kenya. And startups that are part of that get $100,000 plus other support features as well for them to scale their venture. We also have, next slide, the entertainment and media hubs. It's a space for creatives to come create content and put out their content, but as well as grants and a lot of skills that they also get. And then this last one, please. We also did the Innovators program. So it's a program that happened across 3 countries in multiple universities, and it was done with GIZ, essentially enabling student innovators to be able to come up with ventures and to also be able to commercialize that research as well. And that's the clean tech program with UNIDO that is focused on startups that are building solutions in the clean tech space. They get funding, they get advisory, they get a lot of support as well to be able to scale their ventures. Yes, I just wanted to paint a quick picture as examples of some of the work that we do. All right. So I mentioned I was going to share 10 key points, right? And I'm moving pretty quickly. I think I have just a few time slots left, or a few minutes left rather. My second point is that it's not just ideas that create ventures, systems create ventures. So when we talk about universities playing its key role in the ecosystem, in the innovation ecosystem, it's not just about, our students have ideas, or we have, great research that could be great ideas. It's really about coming up with a system that ensures that these ventures can be created. And so that's from problem discovery, prototyping solutions, market validation, access to customers, access to capital, and having a design thinking process for making that happen. Because at the end of the day, a lot of times there's a point where in the innovation ecosystem, say, I don't want to tell you my idea. Or if someone is coming to us for investment, they will say, you must sign an NDA. And we're like, guys, I see 1,000 ideas a day. It's not just about the idea, right? At the end of the day, where the rubber meets the road is at the execution point. And that's why systems are required to create ventures, because a lot of ventures die. Now, the third one is, it's important that we connect that missing link. And what is it that can be done, within our universities to be able to ensure that we're playing that role within the innovation ecosystem? Of course, it's strengthening industry and university collaboration. And we often talk about this, a lot. It's what is the research or what is the idea that you have as a student that can solve problems in industry. And this means that you need to even understand what is happening in industry and what is happening in the market and effectively engage at that point. There's also the part of making capital available, right? Capital for a little bit of experimentation and ensuring that, that capital is able to help students or help MVPs come out. There's also ensuring that curriculum is aligned with venture creation. Now, I know when I was in school, and I think we still have this, we had the entrepreneurship course that was compulsory. Yes. And I think that it's an important one. And one of the questions, because we also in the work we're doing, we've had a number of institutions come and say, we want to strengthen our entrepreneurship program. So for instance, in Namibia, we did that with a university there. And what they wanted to do was, how do we make sure that we go beyond what we're teaching our students in the class and actually give them practical hands-on experience about what it looks like to build ventures in today's world? And so that's an important element as well, is how do we make sure that they're thinking like problem solvers, right? And thinking like they're going to create ventures, because those are two completely different mindsets. Now, the fourth point is, how do we connect African innovation hubs and universities to be able to create this venture system, right? And ensuring that we can basically, with all of the work that CC Hub has done or other innovation hubs, how do we create that partnership and those linkages? Every day I have young people who say, I have this idea. Would you like to fund it? Can I apply for this idea with this program? Can I be part of the community? Can I get that support? The question is, how do we build that proper system and linkage that makes that possible? Now, the last part, or what my charge is essentially, is I think that there's room for creating all of these things. And with universities supporting talent, enabling it through research, hubs bringing the venture building and execution support experience, industry bringing market access and capital plus real problems that they have, and basically using that to inspire students, inspire, educators to say, how do we, through this ecosystem, start to have actual ventures that solve problems and go to market? We're talking about commercialization. No commercialization is going to happen if there's no market for what you're building. And that's the truth. And so it's high time we really started understanding what the market requires. And a lot of times we think that these solutions have to be moonshot ideas. When it comes to innovation, there's innovation that is not necessarily moonshots. How many of us agree? One of the things I thought was so fascinating, I remember, and I think this is it's a perspective or part of their culture that they have in Japan, where they call it Kaizen. So it's like slight improvements to things. I found that at the entrance of like supermarkets or buildings, when it's raining, they had this small machine that, before I tell it, how do we, when it's raining and we carry umbrellas and you're going to walk into a building, what do we do with our umbrellas? We close it, yes. Where do we keep it? Why do we keep it outside? It's wet, right? We don't want the water dripping in when we bring it in. And then we keep it outside and hope nobody takes our umbrella when we go back. However, what they did is they have this it's a very simple machine that when it's in front of the buildings, you just put your umbrella inside it and the nylon wraps around it. And then you can carry it in, because the water is now dripping into the nylon. Once it's all dripped out, you can just take the nylon out, empty it, throw it away, and your umbrella is dry. That's not a moonshot idea. We don't need to AI of the machine learning. And they had it everywhere, supermarkets, hotels. And so when we think about solving problems, and I can give you a ton of examples, how many of us are chronic Bolt or Uber users? Anybody? Okay, maybe I'm the only one. So, how many of us have noticed that if you enter a Bolt or Uber and you ask them transfer, and they call their account number, and you ask what bank? What bank? Who knows why? Sorry, sir? Yes. They use the phone numbers. That was a very important one for the drivers to be able to remember their account numbers. Who else knows why that was a very... Sorry, ma'am? Thank you very much. Now, like I often say, I am a living witness. You know when you want to build something and you say, do user research? I'm a user that you can do research with. I have experienced a time when I sat in an Uber and the trip was done and I did a transfer.
Myself and the Uber guy were in the car for almost 30 minutes. At a point, he started screaming at me, "Madam, where's the money now?" I'm like, dude, I have done the transfer. I've been debited, but he hadn't received the alert. And as far as he's concerned, I haven't received payment, right? And he was screaming at me because he's like, I could get another trip and get out of here. My time is money, but you're delaying me here. But what they solved was that instant feedback. Yes, of course, there's a whole lot behind the system to enable that happen. And we won't go into the technicalities of it, but they solved that pain point. And they saw the widespread adoption of that, right? The other day I went to the market and I was thinking to myself, I was like, oh my God, I don't have cash to pay. Perhaps I'll go to a POS and get cash. But I just said, let me try. And I said to the market, I bought tomatoes, I bought plantain. I was like, will you take transfer or should I get cash? They're like, anyone. I'm like, okay. And now, because again, beyond even that transfer, we know the POS machines and the informal system and how that enabled it, and even shops, right? Because if you go to a business and you want to do a transfer, they'll say, okay, wait, let me tell my madam but now with the POS, they can see the alert on there and they can. Now, let me repeat that again. There's no commercialization for your research or for your idea to go to scale if it's not solving a market problem. Now, this market problem doesn't have to be moonshot ideas, like I said. If we're being observant and paying attention to key issues, right, in industry, it makes it easier for us to build ideas that truly have that opportunity. Now, I think the last thing or last two things primarily for me is this. We've already talked about what is possible, whether it's venture studios on campus or through, a vehicle that enables students, researchers to be able to come up with idea, connect to industry. All of these things are possible. And I think that it's important because the time is now really for universities and even Babcock University to start to play that role in the innovation ecosystem. And the second point is talent is the real output, not degrees. Remember I mentioned it's not about first class. It's really skilled talents that can think. Builders, right? Now, there's this, I won't call it an ongoing joke because it really isn't quite funny. But I can count how many times I've spoken to other leaders of organizations, not just in Nigeria, but on the continent, about how we need to start pushing our workforce to think, rigorous thinking. Because a lot of times we see people stop at the first level of thinking. But there's a lot more rigor, and this is my charge as well to students here, who very soon you're entering, you want to build a venture, you want to get into the marketplace. There's a lot more rigor that needs to come into our thinking, because then and only then can we truly build value and solve problems. Because if you want to do one thing, and I often say to my teams, you want to do this, and I say, the first thing you should ask yourself, why? If you ask why up to 5 times, you get to the meat of it. At a point, you might completely change what it is you wanted to do in the first place, because by your second why, you're like, yeah, this doesn't really make sense. Another thing we say to ourselves at the office is, and so what? For instance, we say, oh, we're enabling 10 ventures to receive $1 million. And so what? What exactly is the value that they would create that will come out of this? Right. And so that's very key. Now, my last one, and this is a very, very important one, is that local context matters. Local context matters. And it's okay for us to learn from what happens in other climes, but we have to be very careful with copying and pasting. Already in our innovation ecosystem, one of the key things that we suffered was, oh, it's happening in Silicon Valley, so it would also work in Africa. We've learned that that is not the way, right? We have to think and design exactly what works for us and think very clearly about why that is important for us. One example I like to give, and we've seen it often, is when we talk about raising the next generation of highly innovative thinkers in the work that we do at CC Hub, who solve our most pressing problems, and ensuring that the examples that we give in the learning process are relevant. Now, one area where you can see this very strongly is in health, right? A lot of times, because the research that is done is not necessarily done on our continent or with us, they say, well, a particular rash or a particular disease represents as red rashes. Now, it's red rashes on a particular skin color, no? Will it be very red on black skin? No, it will be a different color. What happens when a doctor is taught it represents as only red, and then is trying to diagnose it on a skin that is not in the color that produced that misdiagnosis, right? And so at the end of the day, it's part of why local context matters. Yes, we can think global, look at what is done in other climes, but it's important that we adapt that to our own environment and to our own local context. If not, we're just going to be building castles in the air because it's not going to work here. Another reason why is that we have completely different contexts and realities. I remember a particular founder, he's a big founder of a fintech company in Nigeria. And he said he had done a business program with some other founders in Stanford. And when he was talking to them about how much he pays for diesel every year, they're like, they don't have that problem as part of business problems that they have to figure out, right? And so at the end of the day, essentially, is that here on our continent, we're dealing with different realities. Now, yes, those realities might make our business terrain a bit tougher, but it just means that we need more rigor in how we apply innovation to solving our problems. Because then, and truly then, would we start to build the prosperous Africa that we're looking out for. And my last charge is something we always talk about, creative confidence. That belief that we have what it takes to build the solutions that will deliver on our prosperity. And not just for Africa, but also build solutions that would also be global. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah, Imama ya bwa ya, yeah, Ngozi Chukwu nke ya.